Be very careful with the things you listen to before going to sleep. There are some that can bring energies that are not the most suitable for having peaceful dreams. If you ever feel a gaze in the darkness after listening to tales of the night, let me tell you that you are not alone. I want to share with the community a story, the strangest experience I have ever had. I came here last October to the Tales of the Night community, and I have fallen in love with it. So now, I want to participate with you, with this story. When I was a child, my Uncle Ingrid and Uncle Marcos had a very, very beautiful house, from where almost the entire city could be seen. It was on a hill of rich people's houses, from the old rich, and theirs was one of the smaller houses, but we loved to go there. They didn't receive many visitors, but the house was always full of family on the birthdays of my two cousins. I remember very well how in the backyard there was a pool that, with that view of the city in the background, was spectacular. And then there was a small hallway, and the rest of the land began to slope down into a kind of ravine, full of green plants that looked like grass from afar, but had a thick, succulent-like consistency. And that ravine ended at a fence, and then continued several meters further, until reaching the houses on the street below. In a corner where the land met the neighbors, they had a kind of trampoline that looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. One of those beds that are covered by a protective net. It also had a tarp over it that made the interior look completely dark. The underside of the trampoline seemed to be full of weeds that had grown over time, like a witness to the little use it had had for years. At the top, in that dark hideaway formed by the tarp and the net, it seemed like they had stored some things or something like that. I saw it and felt a strong urge to uncover it, climb onto the bed, and start jumping. I imagined it was broken, that it didn't work, and that's why it wasn't being used. And although the neighboring house looked almost abandoned, I was told that people did live there, but it was just an elderly couple. When at one of my cousin's birthdays we were playing hide and seek, I was wandering all over the house, looking for a hiding spot. I was always the most daring one when it came to finding hideouts. At some point that afternoon, I even climbed onto the roof. And yes, I generally looked for places where no one would dare to look for me. So when we were halfway through the game, I approached over there. No one went to that corner of the land. I thought the most extreme thing I could do was cross over, hide in that abandoned corner that the neighbors had. When I got to it, I felt the need to get under the trampoline. I peeked underneath, but it was completely dark. Something told me not to do it, so I climbed up onto the trampoline bed itself. In doing so, I moved some things that seemed to be stored up there. Transparent plastic boxes that I used to hide behind. And so, even if they looked in there, it was almost impossible for anyone to dare to go in. No one was going to look for me in there. I was sure to win. And that was the most daring hideout I had ever attempted in my life. And the minutes passed. I heard them searching one by one in the distance. How they found them until only I was left. And they all started helping to look for me. My brother, knowing me, was the only one who imagined that I could go as far as to hide there. I heard him approaching. How he started calling out to me. "I know you're in there. I knew you'd come over here." Without making a noise, I hid as far back behind the boxes as I could and tried as hard as I could to hold back my laughter so he wouldn't discover me. My brother came up to the trampoline and spoke to me. "I see you. Come on. Come out," he insisted. Then my cousin, the one who lived in that house and whose turn it was to seek us, arrived. He asked my brother if I was in there, and my brother said yes. My cousin said that wasn't good, that they were strictly forbidden from going near that corner, much less crossing over to the neighbor's house. My brother then insisted, no longer playing, that I come out, and I could barely hold back my laughter. "I see you. You're down there under the trampoline. We see your feet." As soon as they said that, something moved. They ran away and I realized they weren't seeing me. Up on the trampoline bed, but underneath, between the bed and the floor, where I hadn't dared to go in. Whatever they were seeing down there, only the elastic tarp separated me from it. Something moved down there. I heard it and felt it. Something down there seemed to be holding back laughter. As best I could, I crawled to get out of there, to run, to find my dad and my uncle who were already running towards me. I remember in dreams that my uncle hugged me. I was already a big kid, but he hugged me, picked me up and carried me towards his house, to later scold me for having gone over there. He told me not to do it again, to swear to him that I wouldn't. And then I remember noticing that my brother and my cousin were crying. They were trembling. I asked them what was wrong, but they didn't tell me. They never told me. My uncle and my dad kept peeking into the trampoline, looking for something, but then they came back to the house. We left shortly after. And that was a strange story. Nothing more. One that no one talked about. That no one spoke of for a long time, but that resurfaced recently. My uncles and cousins left that house when they moved away from the city. They returned 2 years ago and my brother and I reunited with my cousins. 10 years later, we were all reaching our 20s. We hadn't spoken since they left and we were so glad to see them. At some point I asked them if they didn't miss that beautiful house they used to live in, with that view we loved, and they told me that was what they missed the least. In fact, it was one of the reasons they had asked their parents to move as far away from there as possible. They said there was something very bad in it, in the neighboring house, but that it always tried to get into theirs. As soon as they said that, my brother became very uncomfortable. I noticed. He asked us please to change the subject, but I insisted on asking, "Don't you remember? You were there too. You got to see it." They told me. I didn't understand. "Don't you remember my birthday when you crossed over to the neighbor's house to hide in the trampoline?" My cousin asked me, and then addressed my brother. "You never told him what you saw? What we saw down there?" My brother shook his head. My cousin started telling me. "In the neighboring house lived some old people who never came out of their house. But that's not the only thing that lived there. My brother and I, even my mom, got to see something that came out at night from under their house. Something that wandered around the yard. A woman, or what seemed to be a woman. She had very little hair. She walked in a dress that made her look like a ghost. And that's what we thought she was. But I don't know anymore. She could well have been some crazy woman who hid there, who fed on the old people's food when they went to sleep. And that time you went to hide in the trampoline. Your brother approached because he suspected you were there. But because when he got close he saw something moving in the bottom part, he yelled at you. He told you to come out and you didn't. Then I approached. He told me where you were. He told me you were down there. But I didn't know if it was you. I took a rock or something like that. I don't remember, but I threw it in there. And then something peeked out. Something stuck its head out to look at us. I had never seen it so close before. The woman who lived under the house was there. We ran away to get help because we knew you were nearby. Because honestly, I'll tell you, I didn't know if she had you in there. But I didn't know anything else. We went into the house. They made us promise we would never tell you." I laughed and asked my cousin, "Why? Why would they have made us promise that?" "Because she wouldn't let you out," my cousin replied. I stood thinking for a moment, not understanding what he was talking about. And then, suddenly I remembered. I remembered that when I crawled out, some hands coming from the bottom part grabbed me by a leg. I remembered screaming, crying, calling for help, until I saw my uncle approaching. A few meters behind him, my dad was also running. I remembered how I managed to break free, how I ran into my uncle's arms for him to pick me up. even though I was no longer a little kid. I remembered how they took me to the kitchen, and my cousin and my brother were trembling, watching me. Me, who wouldn't stop crying. I remembered everything. My cousin told me that from then on, that woman came closer and closer to their house. They saw her inside their garden. They heard her under their house, everyone except their dad, my Uncle Marcos, who every time he saw them scared, would angrily go out and yell at her to leave, would check every inch, but he never saw her. That's why even today, they doubt what she really was. The last thing they knew is that the house is still there. The neighbor's house is still there. The old people who no longer go out, absolutely at all, are still there. Who knows if whoever lives now, in what was their house, still sees her. They haven't wanted to investigate that. The curious thing is that the suggestion is very strong, at least for me, because after that reunion where they made me remember one of the most intense fears I have felt, and that I had forgotten for so long, since then, at least once a week, something wakes me up. The sound of something moving under the floor. In my house, I've checked. There's a hole, but no nook or cranny where anything could get in. Some animal, perhaps. But it's just a suggestion. I know. I'm almost sure. Thank you for continuing to listen. Thank you for staying on this episode of Tales of the Night, and we remind you, if you like it, that it's time to share it with someone you think will enjoy it and who is not yet part of the community. As a member, you have the right to bring in more people and initiate them as part of Tales of the Night. We continue with more. Don't go anywhere. People who don't finish the episodes have been shown to end up as the protagonists of their own tale of the night. A couple of weeks ago, we finished a very long work around 2 a.m. I live very far from the office, so when that happens repeatedly, I stay at my boss's house, which is a few blocks away. But on this occasion, she was going to stay even later, finishing up pending tasks. So another co-worker who lives 20 minutes from work told me we could take an Uber and go together to her place, and I could stay there. It was small, but she could make me a spot on her living room couch. And of course I accepted. It was either that or wait for my boss, who knows how many more hours she was going to be, or go home to sleep for a couple of hours and then get up to come back. So we took the Uber and arrived at her place very soon. The street was deserted, quiet, perhaps too quiet. The buildings seemed to be old, especially hers, where she lived. Between two closed storefronts was a glass door with bars that looked like it had been closed down. But no. That's where we entered. The driver asked us if we were sure we wanted to get out there, and we told him yes. He waited until we went in. It was very dark in the first hallway with a couple of doors that seemed to lead to the closed storefronts. I expected some light to come on with the motion, that it would have an elevator, but no. My friend told me the elevator didn't work either, so we'd have to walk up. 4 floors. I started to think if it wouldn't have been a better idea to have stayed and slept at the office. Most of the floors were in total darkness, except for a light that I saw, which seemed to be coming from under a door at the end of the hallway on the 2nd floor. I asked my friend what was going on, and she told me they were going to remodel the entire building. It belonged to 2 brothers who had decided to modernize the whole place, and that with that pretext, they were raising the rents on all the tenants. She knew full well that deep down what they wanted was for the tenants who had been there for many years to leave, so they could then rent the units out for 5 times as much to foreigners. However, she wasn't going to leave. She said she was one of the last to arrive, that she would take advantage of every day stipulated in the contract. She still had 6 months left. She told me they had started the remodeling work on the 1st floor, but then it stopped. Apparently the brothers had run out of money, after losing all the rents at once. Anyway, we hurried to go upstairs and my friend went to take a shower. I waited in the kitchen drinking a coffee she told me to make. I stole some cookies, and out of habit I turned on her TV while I found a place to charge my phone. There was a strange knock at the door. It was almost as if they had changed their mind, and I heard footsteps walking away. I thought maybe one of the remaining tenants had seen an unknown person and wanted to make sure everything was okay. But the footsteps came back, approaching now down the hallway. They knocked again. The shower was still running, so instead of bothering my friend, I approached to see if I could see anyone in the hallway. However, when I peeked out, there was no one. It seemed strange to me, but I was going to go back to where I was sitting when I heard a voice. The voice of a little girl asking for her mom, asking if her mom was there. I froze, looking at the door, not knowing whether to open it or not. I walked up to it, but before opening it, I decided to peek out again. No one was visible. I strained to look down, but there was no little girl. I thought I had imagined it. I was sure it would be from tiredness. "You won't see me?" But I heard her again, and this time it was very clear that it wasn't my imagination. And this time it was very clear that it wasn't my imagination. Someone was playing a trick on me. Someone was trying to play a prank. Fortunately, before I could think about what to do, the bathroom door opened and my friend came out. She told me if I wanted to shower, and I told her yes. I had my change of clothes ready. But I guess she saw me looking a bit strange and asked if everything was okay. Told her a little girl had come to knock. What else was I going to tell her? She wrinkled her nose and gritted her teeth, making a disgusted gesture while shaking her head and saying, "Ugh, I know. But you didn't open the door, did you?" I told her no. I asked her why, and she told me for nothing. To shower. That she would tell me later. I got in the shower, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who would let a little girl be out those hours of the morning, alone in the hallway? It wasn't okay at all. What kind of building had I gone to stay in? After a while I got out. My friend had told me she was going to sleep, but I saw her still in the kitchen. I asked her why she hadn't gone to bed, and she told me that sometimes she lost her sleepiness, that was the only thing she didn't like about the building, especially on nights like that one, when she had to get up in a few more hours to go back to work. I took the opportunity and asked her again about the little girl, how they could let her wander the building at those hours. If they just left her alone at night, or if her mom was simply an irresponsible person. My friend motioned with her finger for me to wait. She stayed silent and went to peek through the peephole of the door. Then she came back to where I was and told me very quietly, "There is no little girl. The building is empty." I laughed. I didn't understand what kind of joke she wanted to play on me, but it didn't make sense. It wasn't the right time, and frankly, it wasn't amusing me. "Do you believe in ghosts?" she asked me. I told her no. "Well, you just heard one, friend." She headed to her room and told me to try to sleep, to ignore anything I heard in the hallway, and above all, under no circumstances was I to open the door. She went into her room, and I heard her put on soft music at low volume. I don't know if it was to sleep or to not hear any noise coming from outside. I laid down on the couch she had already set up for me, and every time I was falling asleep, I heard her again, the little girl out there asking if I was going to let her in. As soon as I heard it, I would fully wake up, pay attention, and then stop hearing it. Finally, it was around 5 when I woke up again. But this time it wasn't because of the little girl. This time it was because I heard someone trying to open the door, very slowly, as if they didn't want to wake anyone up. I was alarmed. I felt a surge of adrenaline throughout my body. From my friend's room, that music she had on kept coming out, so she wasn't going to hear it. So I got up and very slowly, taking tiny steps, barefoot to not make the slightest sound, I approached the door. When I got to it, I peeked out, afraid that there might be someone looking, someone who could see the shadow of my eye at the peephole. I caught sight of something, but not there, rather a few meters from the door. It was barely visible due to the darkness of the hallway, but it was a young man, or a sir. I don't know. He was very tall and had a white face, completely white, as if it were a mask, and a very, very long jaw. Deformingly long. He was smiling, like when you fake a smile and your eyes are expressionless. I made a sound of surprise that I couldn't hide, and when he heard it, he ran off into the darkness. I stayed awake. There was still an hour until my friend woke up. When I saw that dawn was finally beginning, I calmed down. As soon as my friend woke up, I told her what had happened. She told me it wasn't possible, that there was no one else in the building, at least, not that night. She told me it was surely just a dream, nothing more, a nightmare from what I had heard, that she had never seen anything like that. But how the hell could it have been a nightmare if I didn't even sleep? Tired and in a bad mood, I got ready to go to work. I think I had never been so afraid, and, well, I don't know if I believe in ghosts or what the hell happened. What is clear is that next month, when I surely have to work late again, I prefer to pay for a hotel or a taxi to my house, rather than staying there again. Good night, community. And if today you hear a little girl at your door, don't open it. Just in case it's him.